What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Properties and Pour-Overs podcast. My name is Adam Colburn, and today I have a very special guest, my friend Tracy Gunn. How are you, Tracy?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for taking time to chat with me. Just to get started, to introduce yourself to our listeners, can you tell me
Mm.
where you're located in the country and what your business looks like currently?
All right. So I'm part-time in it right now between New Hampshire, Southwest New Hampshire, Keene, New
Okay,
Hampshire, and Charlotte.
gotcha.
And the reason I'm doing that is for my business,
Love it.
which is, which we'll get into. So,
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that. What does your business look like right now?
Mhm. All right. So my business right now, um, well, let's take one step back. So last year, I had one candy store. I had gotten rid of a whole bunch of other businesses, and I wanted to expand south.
Okay,
And I also wanted to prove I have a secondary business. It's about teaching people how to exit their businesses. So I wanted to prove with a case study that you could exit with intent wherever. So I kind
sure.
of picked myself up, went to Charlotte, and the goal is I have a 2-year plan of 10 stores, potentially a distribution center, and then to exit for
Love it.
5X. So that's kind of
Amazing.
where I'm at. So I
I
have
love it.
two so far down
Got it.
here.
Cool. So what's brought on candy stores? Like how did you land on that specific business?
Okay. So when funny story. So I was a homeschool mom for 14 years.
Hmm.
I had kids young. And so my kids are like 26 and older. So
Okay.
you can kind of get an idea how old I am. Anyway, so my ex was a 9/11. We kind of hit this place where my kids all went to school. My now ex had some mental health issues, and I
Okay.
needed like to create a little world that was mine
Sure.
that nobody messed with. And so I actually was going to open like a thrift store kind of a thing. And I went to look at the space, and it was like had creaky floors and all like those characteristic candy store feels. And I was like, you know what our downtown needs? And I was just like, that's it. And I just did it.
Okay.
Um, and I was like, I had a whole business plan for the other thing. And I was
Sure.
like, you know what? This is what I'm doing. And so I did
Wow.
it.
That's
And
amazing.
it
I love it.
and I
Pivot right
just
on the
jumped
fly.
in. Mhm.
Yeah. That's
And
super
I
cool.
well, and I just figured, what's the worst, right? It was like $500 a month for rent. And I was like,
Oh, wow.
I mean, I don't have a lot to
Sure.
lose,
Yeah.
right? And I got to create my own little world. And so it's the one business I've kept. The 18 years we just celebrated.
Wow. That's
It's crazy,
amazing.
right? Yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm kind of similar, right? Like I never had because I own the coffee shop, right, with a couple other partners. And it kind of just fell into my lap. Obviously, I've loved coffee forever, and it was always a goal of mine to own a shop, but I
Mhm.
never thought it would be right now, right? And it's
Yeah.
just the opportunity presented itself. Um, and so that's really cool. Like you're already planning on starting a business, but like last minute you pivot into something completely different.
Mhm.
Um, with no prior experience, right? Like you never owned a
Nope,
candy
never
store.
ran a candy store, but I had like my dad owned like a convenience store when we were kids. I had
Okay.
worked in retail. I'd worked in Dunkin' Donuts. I'd waitress, like, and always paid attention. Like I'm a learner, right? So I
Sure.
always was watching, how does this work? How is this more effective? Maybe how could we improve it? Like gameplay, like
Yeah.
just like figuring out the puzzle.
Right.
And so, and I stayed home. My husband at the time, he had his own business in Manhattan. So, we were more entrepreneurial. And
Sure.
so I definitely saw like sounds not nice, but like he could do it, I could do it. I mean, my dad could do it. Like, I mean,
Sure.
right? It was normalized as
Yeah.
opposed to this idea of like, I could never, right? A lot of people
Right.
think that. And I
Yeah.
was just like, well, I mean, what's the worst that happens? I lose
Right.
$6,000. Who cares?
Yeah.
Right. And so that's kind of, that was always the mindset. It was
Hmm.
not a really heavy thing. And so it was just more like, okay, let's just try it.
Yeah.
And then it starts, right? So, and
Yeah.
then you just jump in because opportunity serves itself up and you're like, you know, Do you do it? Do you not do it? And do you regret not doing it? Right? I don't
Right.
want to live with regret. So
A
here we
thousand
are.
percent. Dude, I love
Mm,
that so much. Yeah. Because I mean, that I think that is a common like stigma for a lot of people that aren't either raised up or kind of see entrepreneurship as normalized as like this unattainable goal. Like, how do I go and do the things? And I was kind of similar when I got into real estate, right? Like, I was a real estate photographer for years before I got into investing because I had this mindset like, I don't even own my own home. How am I going to go and buy properties?
right.
Right. And it's just
Yeah.
like stuck in your head. It's like, I've never ran a business before. How am I going to do it now? It's like, well,
Right.
you got to start somewhere, right? And so you were
Yeah.
willing to take that risk, and rather than say like, what could go wrong, you're just like, well, what if it goes right? Right? I have very little to
Exactly.
lose and a lot to gain, so that's
Hmm.
super cool. So let's kind of unpack that, like those early days where you just solo
Mm.
operator, working the
Yep.
store, doing all the things yourself, and like what did that look like as you started to expand and like hire the early time?
Yeah. I mean, well, and you know what? What happened was, again, we had this mental health crisis for my husband, and like everything was falling apart. And this was like my one place where I got to say, right? It
Yeah.
was like my little world, and nobody was going to mess it up except me. So if I mess it up, I live with the consequences. But I was already living with consequences of other people's choices, and
Sure.
so I was like, this is it. So I was like, for me, I was like, you know 9 to 5. My kids would come after school. My friend Maggie who was my son's teacher, would drive him, and it was like a landing place for them after school. But after a while, my husband went to recovery and got some help, and so it was just me, and I
Yeah.
was like, crap. So we weren't making enough. We certainly didn't have benefits, and he had always been the sole provider. And when
Mm-hmm.
he all of a sudden couldn't, it was kind of on me. So I got a job actually at Longhorn
Okay.
restaurant, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like Darden Industries, like the top service provider, and they gave full benefits. And so I worked a couple nights, I made a couple $100 a night. I hired my first staff so that I could go do that, right? I paid them 7. I made 100, whatever. And
Yeah.
that, and I just was like, okay, if I want this dream to keep going, I have to pay my bills somehow. So that's kind of how I transitioned. And I actually stayed there for 9 years,
Wow.
which transitioned into the candy store. We just kept growing, growing. And I'm really grateful because somebody that I was in a group with gave me the email. And I don't know if
Mm.
you've read that book, right?
Yeah.
But
Great book.
from the beginning, I was like, I do not want to be the lady stuck behind the counter. Like, it's
Right.
cool that I'm the candy lady, right? But
Yeah.
I don't want to be the reason everything works. I
For
want to
sure.
be the owner, right?
Yeah.
Which owners club, right? We get that.
Right.
And so, pulling away actually really from the get-go got me to be thinking about, like, how do I make this consistent even without me? How do
Yeah.
I make the pattern work? How do I make the customer have the same experience every time? And I developed a lot of things over the years just by watching, and like, why does it work when I'm here and there and there and I'm not? What happens?
Yeah.
And Longhorn, same thing, has tons of systems. They spent, millions systematizing how to make their product consistent, their
Mm-hmm.
stores consistent. And so I learned. And that's
Yeah.
actually how I was able to open my restaurants. I had 2 restaurants for a while.
Okay.
And it gave me the confidence to do that
Yeah.
because I saw how they were able to do it. Right.
Totally.
I learned
Yeah. That's amazing.
on the
Yeah.
job
Gleaning.
training.
Yeah. Glean that
Hmm.
information from
Yeah.
your employer. So you're learning while
Hmm.
you're earning to go and
Hmm.
leverage into your own business. That's so
And
smart.
benefits. I
Yeah.
mean, and
Absolutely.
a lot of people do it. I mean, it was, eventually it changed, but like, it was a comfort zone, right? It
Yeah.
just like gave us sometimes in the business, like you need a little breathing room because there's so much pressure to perform.
Yeah.
And if you don't, like everything's dire straits. But if you have this extra little help,
Right.
you can breathe a little and you're not
Yeah.
so reactionary?
Absolutely. No, 100%. And I think like I think that's why a lot of people say like your W-2 can be your superpower because you have that
Mm,
steady income to kind of be that safety net for you, at least for a time, where it can obviously
yeah,
turn into handcuffs at one point
sure.
if you stay there too long. But
Right.
having that kind of nest egg or security that you know that bills are going to get paid, everything's going to work out. But now I can focus on optimizing the business and stabilizing it to the point where I can still pay people because now we're responsible for other people's
Yep.
well-being. Like we got to
Yep.
make sure that they're taken care of before we make any money,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
so like even here in the shop, like it was everyone in the ownership groups full like understanding that like we're not taking distributions probably for the first 2 or 3 years, even
Yep.
if they were available, because we need to get to the place where everything's healthy.
Mhm.
Because if not, and we are the people running it, we're going to run it right into the ground, right? Especially like
Yeah.
as owners, if we're taking
Yeah.
distributions, but we're barely covering payroll or rent or whatever, like you can
Right.
easily torpedo that ship before
It's
before you
it's
really
not
get off the
hard.
ground. Yeah.
Yeah. And it happens anytime, right? That's the craziest thing. Like you could, I just had my best month ever, my worst month ever after 18 years. And I'm like, what,
Yeah.
how did that happen?
Right.
Right. And sometimes it's just the things also can torpedo you. But like you just never
Sure.
know. That's business. Like
Yeah.
things change.
Absolutely. Yeah. Having the wherewithal to pivot when you see
Yeah.
something not working and moving
Mhm.
quickly is, I think, is vital for the business to succeed.
That becomes the superpower.
Yeah.
Like I mean, you could cry for a minute and then you put your big girl pants on and you just do the thing. And you
Right.
just get stronger and stronger and stronger at what you can handle, right? What
Yeah.
would break a regular person,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. I love it. I
Yeah.
love all the things. And I love figuring out the puzzle. I think goes back to that, right? It's like
Yeah.
a puzzle. Like
For
anything
sure.
could work if you just mess with it long enough.
Right. Yeah. That's what I love about just business in general, right? Like owning a business, real estate's the same way, like especially because the stuff we focus on, creative finance,
Yeah.
like it's all a game, right? We're just problem solving.
Hmm.
How many levers do I need to pull to get to the result that
Yeah.
everybody needs? And so, yeah,
Uh-huh.
makes
And how
every day
creative can
unique.
we get? Yeah,
Exactly.
for
Yeah, I
sure.
love it. I love it. Well, and I love the way you said, like very early on, you were kind of, I wouldn't, maybe not consciously planning for an exit, but early on getting out of your own way. Because I think a
Hmm.
lot of business owners stay in that operator seat too long before
Yeah.
they elevate to owner and start to delegate
Right.
those tasks. I think that's super
Yeah.
smart.
No, absolutely. I learned the hard way. That's the problem.
Yeah,
Cautionary tale.
you're right, for sure. I think a lot of us are like that. We have to kind of take the bumps and bruises, but
Hmm.
um, that's how we grow. And so, and like you said
For real.
too, like the more challenges that you take, you're not, I wouldn't say risk aversion, but it's just like chaos, like management goes up,
Yeah.
right? So then you can get into
Ah,
more difficult situations and you're not losing your mind as easily because you've already handled
yeah.
something similar.
In some ways, it's like the worst thing because you just get to a
Yeah.
place where you're just like taking on so much. You're like, is this even rational anymore? But
Yeah.
it's so exciting.
Right.
And you just keep going, like, and another one, and
Yeah.
another
Chasing the
one.
high, but in the other direction.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Exactly. It's
yeah.
like, oh my gosh. My husband's like, will you ever be happy? Like, I'm like, no. Are you kidding?
It's too much
No.
fun. It's too much fun to
It's
chase.
so much fun. And again, sometimes a pain in the neck, but all in all, fun.
Yeah, for sure.
Always fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and like you said too, like I don't want to get to the end of my life
Mhm.
and regret not doing the thing. I would
Yeah.
rather at least try and fail than not
Hmm.
try and wonder what could have been.
Right. Well, and I feel like sometimes my kids, because now my kids are all not entrepreneurs. I have a doctor, I have a scrum master, and a safety officer, all high-paying jobs, probably making more than me most of the time. And they're like, just get a job. And I'm like, no, because here's the thing. I would rather bank on me. Like I'm rolling the dice on me and
Yep.
what I can do, what I can figure out on the next thing, on whatever, right? And
Yep.
enjoying myself. I'm not asking anybody to save me, not asking anybody to do it for me. The risk is like it's my risk that I'm taking. My
Yep.
kids are grown
Right.
and it's mine to do.
Yeah.
And I think the rewards will be greater. They can only see the right now,
Sure.
right? Because they're
Yeah.
young and they have families and all that stuff. But like I
Right.
can see my families are done. Worst case, I'll go be a waitress again. I mean,
Right.
or own another restaurant or start
Hmm.
over or it's not, I don't have that fear because I
Right.
know I can figure it out.
Yeah. Totally. Well, and I think too, it's just the personality, right? I think
Mm.
entrepreneurs are just built differently than the
Yeah,
majority of society, right? And like you said, I would rather work 100 hours for myself than 40 for some giant corporate entity that I'm just a number on their spreadsheet, right?
every once in a while I dream about it, and then I'm like, yeah, I'm good.
Yeah.
But it's a nice
Right.
fantasy
For
for a
sure.
second.
Well, and it's like even not even monetarily, but it's just having the freedom to do what you want when you want, right? Like
Yeah.
nobody is calling to check in on me or whatever. I am the owner.
Hmm.
I'm not
Hmm.
reporting to any person
Yep.
who might not even
Right.
like understand me or we don't get along for whatever
Right.
reason, right? That could
Yeah.
negatively affect me
Yep.
and it's out of my control. Like I'm sorry, I'm
Yep.
the way I am, but um being beholden to somebody else to kind of
Mm.
either help you climb the ladder or fall
Yeah.
off the ladder, right? The
Yeah.
politics that are in
Yeah.
the offices, like I hate that. And so
It's my
being able to
mistake to make, right?
right,
It's
a hundred
mine,
percent.
right? And I think like some of that, I think you're right. Like some of that is intrinsic in us. Like, so I learned how to drive a standard. I bought a car like new to me, right? It was a couple years old. And I
Hmm.
had my boyfriend at the time drive it off the lot. I didn't know how to drive it.
Yeah.
And I just got in it and did it. And he was like, are you crazy? I'm like, well, what am I going to do? Not learn it? I have
Right.
car payments. Of course I'm going to learn it, right? But I would rather it be on my mistake,
Yeah,
right? My efforts versus somebody else's any day of the week.
for sure.
Um, and I do think that, entrepreneurship breeds independence and
Yeah.
resourcefulness, right? And we'll say here all the time, be resourceful, right? That's one of the things we have to be.
Right.
And when you walk around in the world, you think, gosh, there's not enough people being resourceful out here, but
Yeah,
we certainly are.
for sure. Absolutely. That's awesome. Well, so like obviously Candy Shop was first. What did
Hmm.
that like evolution look like? I know you mentioned some restaurants. Were there other
Hmm.
businesses that you tried and either exited or just kind of
Yeah.
turned them off to go and focus more heavily on the
So,
candy stores?
so I actually I had a candy store. Then I kind of
Hmm.
got bored.
Okay.
I actually applied for a job at Liberty Mutual. I was going to be customer service while I was waitressing. I was like, they can give me retirement. Sure. I could phone it in, whatever. And it didn't work out. They were scared of the entrepreneurial spirit, which is fine. It worked out for me. And then I
Yeah.
decided, or maybe I should just open a restaurant. Like, just why not? Right. And so I did.
Yeah.
And I stayed at the other restaurant while I was doing that. And then I got mad at my landlord. They were giving me a hard time and they weren't doing the things they promised to do.
Hmm.
Mine was it was in the airport. It was called the flight deck, and where the planes would pull up and you could sit outside and have mimosas and watch the
Yeah.
planes. It was
That's
really
awesome.
fun. I miss that a lot. But anyway, and I didn't even know how the first week, I didn't even know how to turn on the equipment because I wasn't
Oh, wow.
back of the house. I was front of the
Sure.
house.
Yeah.
But by the end, I was cooking breakfast and I was doing everything because you're dependent on staff. So
Right.
anyway, then I opened a second restaurant. That one was like 6,500 square feet. And it was, again, I like second gen spaces, which
Hmm.
basically just means, you're building on someone else's dreams, right?
Right.
Their dreams fell apart and you're just reaping the benefit of all that they left behind. And so it just makes it easy.
Sure.
And so that one I opened in 2 weeks. I got my liquor
Wow.
license, all the things. And I was just like, you know what? I was like, I can do this because I was mad at the landlord. I was going to close, and then I just wound up with two. So that's what happened. And so I wound up with two, and then I opened another candy store. So at 2019, I was running all four.
Wow.
And so kind of got burnt out. And I was like, I'm going to sell. And then the real estate guy was like, or the broker was like, don't bother, just liquidate. And I was like, what? And this is where exitable comes in, right?
Mm.
I realized, crap, I have been building for more and never building for exit.
Yeah.
And I realized how much I didn't know, even though I was a 10, 12-year veteran of business ownership, that I didn't understand the long game. I didn't really
Sure.
have a target in mind. And so that kind of like, that's my big passion project, right? We got into real estate, we got into other things, but that whole piece about how I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
Like 95% of business owners. Like you have no idea. You're not going to sell. Most of them are not.
Right.
You don't know what it's worth. You don't know what the value. You don't know what is next. And then you're stuck in it. And then you just liquidate for pennies. And it's
Right.
like this heartbreaking thing. And I was like, people need to know this. And that's kind of like spawned the new business that I'm really passionate about, which is business consulting and helping people not only be able to sell their businesses, but exit them, meaning
Yeah.
be owners.
Totally. That's
Nobody knows how
huge.
to do that.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, of course, like the rise of Cody Sanchez and buying boring businesses and stuff. But I mean,
Yes.
like the stat is crazy of how many business
It's
owners that
crazy.
end up just closing their doors rather than selling, even if it was just directly to like an employee or something.
Yeah,
Like
because
that
they're
missed
not
opportunity.
transferable,
Yeah,
right?
like all of that time and effort that you built into that place, and sure, it provided the lifestyle that you had, but now what do you have when you retire? Like you have no sort of nest egg for this legacy that you created,
No,
and now it
no.
just falls apart. Like you said,
40 years
that's
and you have no
heartbreaking.
retirement. It is
Yeah,
heartbreaking. And also, think about like a Main Street and all those landmark businesses that have been there forever
yeah,
and they just disappear. What happened? Like their value just disappears like that.
yeah,
And I find that saddest part of all, right? Because there's
right,
value and then there's not, right? A
yeah,
house is a house, right? Even if it's falling down, it still has value.
mm-hmm,
The business that closes and liquidates, it's like it never existed.
right,
I hate that.
yeah,
Anyway, so
for
yeah, so
sure.
like that's kind of like my passion, which is kind of why I'm like proving
Mm-hmm.
that you could go someplace else, start from scratch, do a completely different model, and get the exit you want in a really quick amount of time. And that's kind
Yeah,
of what I'm working on.
I love that. That's awesome. Are you doing direct like one-on-one consulting? Are you planning like a workshop where people can come in and kind of get an overall framework of what this looks like?
Yep. So we've been doing a bunch of things the last couple of years. I have a partner in England who this is what she does for giant corporations. And then
Okay.
for me, we're planning some 2-day workshops. We've done a ton of webinars. We've done some one-on-one consulting. And we're just trying to figure out what's our best way to do,
Yeah.
right? Like, and sometimes it just takes, this is completely different. You know, I'm used to food service, waitressing, bartending, running like more retail versus
Sure.
this is consulting. It's a
Yeah.
very different game. And so it's part of why I'm loving this whole idea of the keynote and all that, because I've been practicing this stuff for like the last 4 years about like
Yeah.
how to get people to know how to, because it's not just like, oh, how do they get them to learn so that I buy from me? It's more, how do I get them to listen so they don't screw themselves over?
Right.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
pardon my French, but like that's just the reality. Like that
Totally.
they don't wake up and like now they're working at Walmart forever
Right.
when they're 90 because they can't have to.
Yeah.
It's just I hate
Yeah.
it. So yeah, so I'm like the pressure is on. So that's kind of like my big Mount Everest in the next couple of years. It's like I want to help 1 million small business owners to develop and implement their exit plans. Like,
Wow.
that's my it's like I don't know, it's my thing. I love it.
That's amazing. That's super cool and incredibly valuable for both sides of the coin, right? The
Yeah.
sellers, but then also somebody like ourselves that would rather come in and just buy a successful
Yeah,
business than
much
bootstrapping
easier.
another one, right? I'm sure
Correct.
you don't want to
Much
start
easier.
another restaurant from
No,
scratch. I for sure don't want to start another
no.
coffee shop from scratch, but I will gladly buy another successful business from somebody
Growth by
else
acquisition is the best way to go,
a
for
hundred
sure.
percent. Yeah,
You
way
know,
quicker and like going back to our like creative roots right within
yeah,
the real estate stuff buying all these businesses on terms is very common right and it's beneficial to both sides of the coin
yep,
the sellers
yes.
to avoid any capital gains taxes and then obviously we can get in for much lower down than if we were trying to
But they
go
can
with
earn
the
ins. They could
bank
keep the parts they like. They could bring a
right
partner on. There's so many ways you could do it. And, you know, like we said with Pace, like we've learned so much about creative.
yeah
There's so many different ways you can do it. It's not as simple as I'm just going to say, right?
right 100%
It's just, you know. So anyway, I'm excited about it. And I'm like really excited about how to make it work. Again,
yeah
figuring out the puzzle.
absolutely that's amazing well cool as we're kind of wrapping up here, I love the story of the coffee shop, and I know you said you have two right now.
I have two. One is a co-brand, so I
Okay,
figured out a way to do one creative. I
nice.
come in and I help them to be more profitable by sharing their staff.
Mm-hmm.
And then my other one is just a solo. It's just me. It was my flagship one in North Carolina. And then I'm looking to do 8 more this year. So
Sure.
we'll see how that
Yeah.
goes.
And the goal is once you get to 10, stabilize those for a handful of years and then exit.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. I mean, or I may not. This is the funny thing about exiting is that you get to a place where if you're not running it,
Mm-hmm.
do you really want to sell it?
Right. Sure.
Right?
Yeah. It's just free
Because you're
cash
not
flow
in
for
it
you.
and it's
Totally.
not painful anymore. You get rid
Right.
of the pain, and all of a sudden they're like, this is easy.
Yeah.
Right? And
Totally.
so that's kind of the goal. There's a lot of options, right? We could figure out a franchise model. We could
Mm-hmm.
start acquiring. We could still keep expanding. There's a lot of different ways, but the goal was to just really be able to prove that I can do.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So
I think you did that. You've positioned yourself
I'm
super well in the
trying.
space. I
I'm
love it.
trying.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, Trace, as we wrap up, like if there was one piece of advice that you could give your younger self or somebody that's looking to start in either just bootstrapping a business or acquiring a business, like what is that piece of advice?
It would be to read the E-Myth,
Okay.
okay? And to create an exit plan from the beginning, like to know where you want to go. You're going to change your mind.
Right.
But like most people have a plan when they start,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because they're starting, but they
Sure.
almost never create another plan after that. They
Yeah.
just adapt as they go. And if they would just create the plan or where they're going,
Yeah.
they can adjust as they're going and still be heading in the right direction. Otherwise, they kind of do this, right?
Right. Yeah. Stuck on the
More is
hamster
not a
wheel.
direction, right?
Right.
More is not a target. And
Yeah.
so those are the two things, like, because I think people need an exit plan from the beginning. They need to
Yeah.
know where they're going, what they're aiming for. Because how do you know? It's like people don't set up to run a marathon and not know where the finish line is,
Right.
right? And this is a
Yeah.
marathon, like
For
this is
sure.
not, I'm dialing it in from Tahiti. You're not doing it,
Right.
right? You're working and
Yeah.
it's a marathon. It's a long game. And
For
so you
sure.
have to know where the end is
Yeah.
and what you want it to look like. And then you can adapt.
Super
But
smart.
those are the two things for me.
Yeah. Start with the end in mind. I love that. That's
Mhm.
awesome. Well, Tracy, I really appreciate you spending the time sharing some of your insight. Where can people get a hold of you if they want to talk about one-on-one consulting or learn about your
Yeah.
two-day workshops? Like, where should they reach out?
So I'm no, I'm the Tracy Gunn everywhere. So, LinkedIn, YouTube, um, Facebook, Instagram, all the things. And then also Exitable. We have a website, getexitable.com, and that will have a lot of free resources to just show you what is your business worth.
Yeah.
How do I create an exit plan? What's involved? Like, what do I even want? Most people don't even know what they want, forget about where they're going.
Right.
So all those free resources are there just to kind of help people to start to think about what that exit might look like.
Amazing. That's awesome.
Thank you. This was
Yeah.
amazing. I
Thanks
really
so
appreciate
much.
you having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure. So, guys, like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. Thanks for sticking to the end. Until the next episode, I will catch you later. Peace.
Bye.